Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another installment of Honor Kings and Sons TV podcast. I am streaming live here on TikTok, and I'm excited for everybody who's been tuning in. You know, it's February, it's Black History Month, and I know right now there are so many people of African descent, African Americans, biracial, mixed with African descent that are, tuning in, as well as we have people from all over the world that's just doing things to promote Black excellence. I have on my Black excellence shirt today, and there's so much behind Black culture and African American culture and African culture that's just so rich and so beautiful. As a person that is faith based and has a faith based platform, it does get challenging to explain to a lot of people how it's very important to be authentic in all ways, not just your faith. And so some people, because of the narrative that's in the media about, how Black people take their culture too serious, and how we're always trying to put ourselves in the public eye to talk about our history. Those statements are just so obnoxious. When we talk about nationalism, when we talk about pride, within the definition. It's everybody's right to showcase the pride of their nation, their culture, their history. I think we get a lot of definitions mixed up when we start talking about stereotype and discrimination, when we start talking about racism. A lot of people don't even know that there are other things that exist, like you have colorism, you have ethnic racism. These are the type of things that exist that have plagued communities, especially the African American community, for a long period of time because of the structure that was instilled in slavery. And let me get into a few things today. I firmly believe that our culture as Black people, our culture has not been about us being black and divided. It's more about us becoming black and subsided, which means that over time, whether it's internally the ignorance of our own, pushing a narrative that aids to all other nations to benefit and profit off of us, or it's the ignorance of others who, just buy into the stigma that's been on African Americans and Africans, since, the transatlantic slave trade up until now, that people refuse to see us outside of another narrative. Whichever way you want to spin on it, we just, have been the rag doll amongst nations for a long period of time. And it's very unfair because our history does get attacked the most out of everybody else's history. There are a lot of things in the United States of America that, if you study the history of, it is a legit fact that these things were created for the disenfranchisement and the sectioning off of African Americans, those of African descent, to not thrive. Recently, I was listening onto a podcast. It was just a clip scrolling through my feed, and there was a statement that was made when it talked about the more well-behaved blacks in the world were allowed back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. They were allowed to come into the country because there wouldn't be any issues with them in terms of abiding to the system, in terms of them trying to disrupt any agendas or make any form of impact in the culture. And so they were given access to housing, they were given access to real estate, they were given access to business credit. But the ones who were born and were the children and the descendants of slaves, they were still marginalized and written off and put to the side. There's just so much, when you get into African American history. It's very unfortunate the different things that I can go through. A lot of people don't even know that the history of the background check. The background check was created to make sure that African Americans who were blue collar workers did not take in the jobs that wanted to be for whites only. Some people argue this and say, no, the reason for the background check was just something to, balance out the ratio of people who had criminal records. But if you go back and you study criminal history, the 13th Amendment, pretty much was something that was put in place that you could only keep a slave if he is under, a criminal infraction. If he committed a crime, you can have him do the labor of a slave again through that act. So, there's just a lot of things like, and I study world history. I'm a world history fanatic. I was actually a world history teacher. My entire teaching career, there was three subjects I taught. It was either music, mathematics, or world history. So I don't have to lie about that. And when you study world history, you study like the history of immigration, you will be surprised to know that the whole structure of ethnic racism, colorism, it goes much deeper than even African Americans. Up until the early 1900s, you still had Italians, Asians, people coming in from South America, Southeast Asia. When they were coming into the United States, they were experiencing what we would call racial tension. It wasn't until we started to see large markets of African American groups in the Midwest, in the far West, like California and those areas, that there was, I guess you would say, an opening or an invite for people of complexions to be identified as under Caucasian or white or Anglo-Saxon. So for a long period of time, Italians, Irish people, people from Southeastern Europe, they were, heavily mistreated by, you would say the colonial, United States citizens, way back in the 1800s, up until you had African Americans and Asians and some Native Americans, really opening up markets and opening up avenues in the United States. And so to incorporate and to make sure that African Americans did not overthrow, the markets, they started to take in people and classify them as white Caucasian. So you might think that, oh, this is some Nation of Islam, Farrakhan, Muslim, knowledge, Dr. Umar type stuff. No, this is public domain. This is stuff that you can go and research. So when it comes to talking about, just the state of black culture and those who, are of African descent, it's this for me to be the person to unpack everything. I mean, it would take a lifetime. There's people who've been talking about this for their entire lifetime, and their narrative and their dissertation of this topic, still continues to be challenged, still continues to be halted, still continues to receive pushback. You think about people like Cornel West, you think about people like I wouldn't even go that high. You think about people as somebody like a Dave Chappelle, right? Who actively talks about black culture historically, socially in a way that brings people into the conversation. And you think about how these people have been consistent talking about this for years and years and years and years. And you would think that we would have a place or a standpoint where it's like it's settled. People understand. Now let's build together. But every year there's a new wave of controversy. There's just there's always gonna be something that combats. It's the nature of how the world is. I mean, I'm a faith based person. I'm not an apologetic, I would say, but I've defended the faith over the years as being a Christian. And just when you think, okay, I don't have to explain anymore, now I can just build and grow with people. You can't, because there's always a new research, there's always a new study that combats the existence of Jesus Christ and all this stuff. It's one of those things that it's just going to be there, but you just have to be a person that is of thick skin and a person that is willing to continue to share to people what it is that you want to communicate as you grow in love with people. So, and this is not even my rant for Black History Month. I firmly believe that when it comes to being being black in America, or just knowing that I'm African American, I'm of African descent, it's just history in general. What a lot of people, when you get into the business world and you study the history of business, you learn more and more that racism plays into the success of many businesses and industries and world systems. So it's effective to have everything about it in full effect. It's effective to have everything about it that hurts black people, African Americans, those of African descent. You know, it helps for us to hurt, if that makes sense. It helps for us to stay ignorant. It helps for us to be super talented, super athletic, super smart, super skilled, super witty, super funny. It helps for us to take those skills that can build wealth for families and generation, and to twist it and to taint it and to make it fraudulent, make it criminal, make it whatever the case may be. It benefits a lot of different people. A lot of people's pockets stay fat whenever we act on those narratives. And what's the messed up part is that because 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 before any of that stuff was made for profit, it was actually part of our story, and we can't even tell our story without somebody trying to make a profit. Makes it even more messed up, man. I really believe that we just need to get to a place where we can be able to build as is, and that the powers that be, don't fight us hard for control. I think if we really boil down to it, there is it's control. It's human nature, for us to dominate and have dominion, but it's control. Like, I don't even have to get into the ignorance that has been used by people of other cultures, against black people, like things like "go back to your country" and things like that. I mean, like that's not rocket science. If every black person left the United States of America, good luck, America. And it's not rocket science. As a matter of fact, if any group of people, especially that come in the working class and significantly help the working class thrive, like prime example, if you take everybody of Latino descent, South American descent out of America right now, good luck, America. Like, let's not even play here. And like I said, it's not about racism. Racism just plays into the narrative that allows different systems and different powers that be to thrive. That's it. Racism plays into the narrative, like, because it's not rocket science. One of the things that bothers me when we talk about certain topics in the world is the fact that it's not rocket science. You can sit down and write this on paper. You can sit down and draft this, and it would be clear as day that all of this stuff is systematic. It's not rocket science. But this is just where we are in the world. It's 2024. We still have all types of things going on. We have police brutality. We have people being written off in the marketplace. People being disenfranchised. We still have gentrification going on. We still have race acts of racism going on, bigotry. We still have all those things going on. And to be honest with you, I'm at the point now where it's not even that the message of our people have not been accepted, respected, and come across. It's just simply behaviors. It's behavior patterns. As long as there is a narrative out there to push these acts to manifest into real life, then they're going to continue to happen. And it won't be because we're not doing our part. I think African Americans, people of African descent, black people, we have made it very clear that 99% of the time we are not the violent ones. 99% of the time we are not the ones trying to destroy systems. We're not the ones trying to overthrow. It's just a byproduct of who we are, to make something out of nothing, to be phenomenal, to be awesome, to be creative, to just dominate like anybody else would want to dominate. And I mean, it's to the point now where it's like it's very set in stone that African Americans are not what we have been driven to be by media for a century. You know, one of my favorite things that I learned in history was The Birth of a Nation. When I learned about that film and the history behind that film, it's amazing how that was Hollywood's first big production that was released. President Woodrow Wilson called it a masterpiece of American culture. And if you watch that film, pretty much that film, and like I said, this is all public domain. You can look this up. That film pretty much was the blueprint for like American cinema for a very long time. And when I say blueprint, meaning like the structure, the scenery, how employees were paid, structure of actors, extras. A lot of people don't know this, but all the African Americans in that movie, they were extras. Obviously none of them had significant roles from except from the ones that, they're either being attacked, or they're either being, mocked of some sort, or they're being represented as beasts and thieves and all that stuff. None of them were allowed to talk or socialize with the white actors. There were actually white actors who were dressed in blackface, that were impersonating the actual, blacks that were on set. If you watch that film, pretty much the blacks that were on set did not even like do any significant acting. It was the white actors who were in blackface. They did a lot of the lead parts and representation of them. And the blacks that were in that film were not allowed to talk or socialize. And that was the norm, I think, up until, if I'm not mistaken, up until 1949. I have to go back 1949, or like in the 50s, 1954. A lot of African Americans were not allowed to have co-star roles, and if they did land a co-star role, they were not allowed to interact with with the white actors. You do have some black and white films where there were African Americans who had roles and they had lines, but they were not considered co-stars, right? They that was just not a thing for them. And like I say, when you just look at that, you look at to where we are now, like it's not rocket science, like and even when you look at when Donald Trump was president, and if people don't know by now how politics works, like it's not a win for nobody. There's somebody that will get the short end of the stick when it comes to the presidency. So when I looked at Donald Trump in office, I honestly did not look at Donald Trump from a racist standpoint, simply because of this. I looked at Donald Trump as he's in the president's seat, and the president has more of an agenda to maintain and keep for the powers that be than for the people. That's a fact. The second thing is that if people were counting on Donald Trump to be any other thing than Donald Trump, how he talks in private, how he talks in public with his colleagues, if they were expecting him to be anything else but who he is, then you shot yourself in the foot with that. So any comments he made about Puerto Ricans, about Mexicans, about black people, about any race and stuff like that, and how he spent it, and the clips that they put on him, all of that stuff is systematically planned and driven. Whether the man is racist or not, he wouldn't be the first white guy that was outwardly racist, you know. And we have to understand that all of this is a big game. This is a big game, So for people who were hurt when he was president and they felt his remarks toward um, other other nationalities other than himself, I mean, come on, fam. Like, it's 2024. Like, being butthurt over that is a waste of time. I do believe though that now more than ever, with it being 2024, this is a grace period like none other than no other time in history. I would say from 2008 to now, I believe that God has given the earth one of the best grace periods on planet Earth. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the access to wealth and the ability to obtain wealth from illegal means without facing criminal accusation or without facing criminal investigation, simply because of the color of your skin or where you live, it's the most phenomenal time of all. You know, you got white kids becoming millionaires on Twitch and TikTok. You got black kids becoming millionaires on Twitch and TikTok. You got Hispanic, Asian people getting into real estate, building wealth, buying land. This is a beautiful time. I wasn't born in the 80s. I was born in 1990. I was born in the 90s. But, I saw the aftermath of what happened in the 80s in North America, with drugs, the war on drugs, with Reagan, the era of the drug kingpins and gangs, terrorizing neighborhoods and schools and just that whole generation that came from those who fought in war and their parents were alcoholics, having PTSD, and mom having to work 2 3 jobs, and then the whole thing with drugs. You had kids back in the 80s as young as 15 years old becoming millionaires within 2 years of being in the drug game, but it was illegitimate money, and that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But that era is never coming back. And there's tons of documentaries. You can watch a whole bunch of documentaries during that time, the era of the kingpins and the cartels and, the operations in Nicaragua and stuff like that, different civil wars going on in South America and Africa, and the supplying of weapons and drug smuggling and weapon smuggling and political corruption, and the post apartheid. And I mean, I can just go on and on and on and on. When you just pay attention to that era from like 1950 to 19 from like 1950 to like 1995, if you pay attention to those 45 years of what went on in the world, it was a treacherous time. But you have people out there making money, but see, it was super hard back then to move that money. And the reason why it was super hard to move that money is because there's too much corruption. So if you had a person that became a millionaire for selling drugs, he had to pay off cops, pay off politicians. If a cop got greedy, or if you had a dirty, agent in the DEA, CIA, FBI, or whatever, or you had entire precincts involved in stuff. If you had a military intel, whatever the case, if people just started getting greedy, then what happened? Everybody started snitching. People, especially in the black culture, hip hop culture, when people, bring up snitching and stuff like that, man, let me tell you something. You watch some of these documentaries, you do your research. Black folks wasn't the only people snitching on black folks, and snitching is something that is bigger than what we think. You have white people that snitch on each other. You have Asian people that snitch on. Snitching has nothing to do with race. Snitching has everything to do with character. Snitching is not a race thing. Snitching is a character thing. It's like I said, it's not rocket science. It's the fact that people agree to do something, and there's good or bad consequences. Once the good consequences have run out and everybody's backed against the corner, the person to jump ship first, most likely taking everybody down with them, and that's it. And so when we come to today, 2024, like the aftermath of all of that turmoil, right? Has left good, bad, ugly, whatever you want to name it, and in all types of communities. Every community is affected by that. White people who snitch on each other, their community is affected by that. Blacks who snitch on each other, their community is affected by that. Asian, South American, Canadian, like whatever. Anybody who snitches, your community, your culture, your nation is affected by that, depending on whatever sector, industry, or set of business or whatever is going on. But I digress on that topic, and I've moved back to how we're talking about wealth and stuff like that, and how the opportunity is there, and it's amazing and it's awesome. Let me tell you something. Listen. You can become a legitimate businessman. There's more avenues to make clean money than any other time in the world. As a matter of fact, I think within, honestly, I think within, I will be bold in saying this. I think within a decade, I think unless the powers that be make it their business for this to stay in existence, I think selling drugs won't exist anymore, because people would have transferred to selling it for profit legally. I mean, the opium war, or the war on opium that they have right now, quote unquote, which is really just anybody who knows the history knows this. It's sad to say it in this way, but literally what happened to blacks with heroin and crack back in the 60s, 70s, and crack was in the 80s, obviously. But what happened with black people with drugs and addiction in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that's just literally happening right now with white folks and opium, even though drug addiction is drug addiction. Anybody can be addicted to drugs. It's just how you spin the narrative on the amount of people who are addicted to the drug, you know. But anyways, since we have this war on opium right now, we have that going on, and it's largely in the Midwest, not so much on the East Coast. But like I said, unless the powers that be make it their business, that the illegal drug business stays in power, within a decade, ain't nobody gonna be selling drugs illegally, because markets are opening up for you to sell it legally. They started with weed. You telling me they ain't gonna push heroin soon? And heroin goes back the furthest. Opium goes back the furthest in world history. That drug goes back the furthest. Even though, if you do your research, you do find cocaine in world history. As a matter of fact, I learned this when I was studying. Oh my God, I forgot the gentleman's name. Um, oh my God, he was a Moorish scholar. I can't remember his name right now, but he found a documentary called the story of the cocaine mummies. This is an actual documentary. You can find it on YouTube. You guys look it up. The story of the cocaine mummies. It's about how pharaohs and Africans who are from Egypt, how they traveled through South America, they traveled through North America. Those systems were already in place. So the whole story about Columbus, we been knew that was a fluke. It's no reason to lie or even sound like I'm being a black radical. It's just public domain. You can go look that up. But yeah, there are samples of cocaine being found in the hair of pharaohs and of Egyptians and people from Africa. Long before cocaine was something that was being found in places like South America and even places like North America. But like I said, I digress again. I don't want to continue to drift off. If you look, man, drugs are going to be a legal commodity within a decade. They're just, I mean, we already know that drugs were something that was being used, and see, here's the thing, saying drugs is actually the wrong term. Saying drugs is actually the wrong term because we've given negative connotations and made it a derogatory term that we use for everything. I mean, we used to have drugstores back in the day. Like it was said on the wall, drugstore, Kelly's drugstore, or whatever. And we have to understand that we've given that word drug a negative and derogatory connotation for decades and decades and decades. And this is why it's easy to spin the narrative about drugs because cocaine was used in what 60% of American products between the 1930s up until the 1970s, right? The whole thing with placebos, and sugar-based pills and all that stuff. And let me tell y'all something. Anytime a market is about to dwindle but it's profitable, they just shift it. They changed the name, they changed the branding, they changed the location, they changed the packaging, they changed the marketing. I mean, this is not old, this is not new stuff, people. This people been doing this a long period of time. So like I said, unless the powers that be want illegal drugs to continue to come in and be sold and yada 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 and all that stuff is gonna be legal, man. And what's really messed up is the people who's doing, a life sentence or 30 years plus for selling weed back in the day, selling cocaine, selling heroin. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of them that's doing 40 years for selling weed are very pissed. Everybody has been saying that for the last 10 years that I remember in 2014, I'll never forget. I was watching the news. 2013, 2014. There was two kids from the University of Pennsylvania. They made the first app for a weed dispensary. It was all over the news. It was they were going to put out an IPO, make themselves a publicly traded company, and it was going to skyrocket. I don't know how they're doing today. I'd have to look it up and see if there's probably a video on YouTube. And can you imagine a guy who was moving large pounds of weed back in the day, got caught, got a 34-year sentence, don't matter if he white, black, Mexican, Asian, don't matter. And now you got two, what they would call punk kids. You got two punk kids from Ivy League school that create a weed dispensary company, create an app for it, and on the verge of becoming millionaires, and this guy's stuck in prison. So like this is the world that we live in, ladies and gentlemen. Like I say, on a higher level, it has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with being subsidiary. That's just what it is. So I digress. I can go on and on and on and on and on. And I will say this for those who made it all the way to the end: if you are faith based, I encourage you to get involved in your history. Hispanic Heritage Month starts, in August. It ends in September. Black History Month, right? We know that is all of February, right? You got indigenous, indigenous. I don't want to say it wrong and disrespect anybody from that descent, but the celebration of Native American and Indian culture. I mean Asian culture, like you name it, like literally, just go study history, go study world history, and you'll be surprised. And have your history book or your history app next to your Bible and line things up. You'll be surprised, man. A lot of these things are systematic. It plays into a narrative so that the powers that be can thrive financially, and keep doing business by devising systems and plans for us to not come together in no way, shape, or form. And look at all the world leaders. Every time you stare at a world leader that was going to bring everybody together, look how they savagely died. I mean, let's just exclude the black people that were killed. let's pretend that nobody cared about that. Well, actually pretending in this case, because there actually are people that didn't care about Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and the others. But I digress. But let's just pretend that was, whatever, and pay attention to all other world leaders who tried to bring everybody together. At some point, they were savagely taken out, because when you bring everybody together, what happens is that it's spiritual in nature. Like, the earth moves a different way. Why? Because we're all connected. If we're all spiritual beings, right? That means that we would be one spirit. The earth will respond to us different. You know, shoot, God will respond to us different. If you look at the story of the Bible, there's only 3 times, I think, like, I always forget the number, but if you study the Word of God, there's only a couple of times in the Bible where the Bible says that God stood up off his throne and he was moved by what was going on in the earth. The first time was with the Tower of Babel, because the people were in unity. And if you study scripture, God was not upset that they were unified. He just saw that what they were unified about was actually going to hurt them, not hurt him, not be a threat to heaven. It was going to hurt themselves. So that is why he did what he did, by scrambling the tongues of all the people. So we have to understand that if the human race was in unity, one spirit, the earth would respond different, the heavens would respond different, God will respond different. It's a powerful thing to have people in unity. So when you have a person that raises up and they're on the verge of putting, all people together, what happens? They get taken out, you know? And I don't even think that God sets it up that way. I think man understands from the standpoint of God that when you have unity, it's a dangerous thing. But like I said, man, I can keep going on and on. But I love everybody that's showing me love on my podcast. Shout out to all the people that's downloading my episodes. I want to be global with this thing. My first couple of episodes from my recorded seasons in the past, I had people from Germany downloading my stuff, people from Cali. So I appreciate everybody. Shout out to, so many people that supported my podcast, that showing me love. Honor Kings and Sons, the brand, you have Jackson Academy that shows a lot of love. There's a lot of local businesses and sponsors and partners I'm going to be working with within the next year or so that have shown some love. It's beautiful what's going on. So I'm looking to really pull in those numbers. You guys make sure that you follow me at Honor Kings and Sons on Instagram. Make sure that you're following me at DJonesHKS on YouTube. I have actually 2 YouTube channels. I have Honor Kings and Sons TV, and then I have my Honor Kings and Sons podcast platform. So you can find me when you type in Honor Kings and Sons on YouTube. So be able to check me out there. And I have my episodes I'm going to be putting out for the Dark Files. I have my next set of episodes I'm going to be dropping. My comic series. I have so many different little segments I'm putting out. So be sure to definitely follow me. So appreciate you guys. Love everybody. And, make sure that you continue to download and stream the podcast. Tell a friend about it. And I'm looking forward to what God is going to do at the end of the year. Trying to get to that 100,000 subscriber mark. I know it's going to hit pretty soon. So you guys continue to support me, all right? Take care. This is Darian Jones on the Kings and Sons TV podcast, and we out.